What if I told you the biggest mistake people make in divorce has nothing to do with lawyers, courtrooms, or custody battles? It's that they go through the entire process on autopilot, reacting instead of deciding, and they wake up on the other side with life they never chose. Today's certified divorce coach, Tamar Barbash, is here to share with you exact framework for turning the worst chapter of your life into the first page of your comeback story. Welcome back. Welcome to Divorcing Strong, the podcast that pulls no punches when it comes to divorce. I'm Becky Sampson, better known as Bulldog Becky Brockovich. And I'm here to give you the straight talk, the strategies, and the subpoena secrets you won't hear anywhere else. With expert guests and proven advice, you'll learn your rights, your options, and gain your power that encourages a fair and equitable outcome. Divorce doesn't have to break you. It can build you. Let's get to it. Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Divorcing Strong podcast. I am your host, Becky Sampson, as always. And I have always loved getting out there in this community. And we were just having this conversation with the guest, or I was having this conversation with the guest, that so many of us are connected. So one of my guests was on her show today, and now she's on my show today. So we are very excited today to hear from Tamar Barbash, because she's been in this industry for a few years, and she's seen a lot, she's experienced a lot, and she's helped a lot. So we're going to talk about something like conflict. How do we deal with conflict? How do we best navigate through this process without really falling into pieces, and we can reset our life and move forward in a positive way. And so I really love the title of this is that, can we really turn divorce into something that is stepping stones instead of the stumbling blocks? I've always said, look, a stone can be one way or another depending on how you're chosen to look at it. So we want to welcome you to another episode. So on today's episode of Divorcing Strong, I'm joined by Tamar Queen Barbash. She's a DCA certified ADR divorce coach and founder of New Beginnings Breakup and Divorce Coaching. Divorce has a way of making people feel like their story is over. The dreams they had, the life they imagined, the future they planned, it can all feel like it's disappeared overnight. But Tamara believes something radically different. That divorce doesn't have to be the end of the story. In many ways, it can be the beginning of the most intentional chapter of your life. Tamara brings both professional expertise and personal experience to this work. She holds a Master of Social Work from, I hope I say it right, Yeshiva University, and spent years helping people navigate emotional transitions. But her perspective deepened when she experienced the end of her own marriage. That experience inspired her to create New Beginnings Breakup and Divorce Coaching, where she now helps men and women move beyond the emotional chaos of divorce and start making clear, strategic decisions aligned with their goals and their life as they want to rebuild next. So she's also the host of New Beginnings, a marriage and divorce podcast, where she explores the cultural myths around marriage and divorce and why so many people carry unnecessary shame about starting over. So stay tuned, because today we're exploring how to transform the end of a marriage into the beginning of a powerful new one. Welcome to the show.
Hi, that was some intro. Thank you so much.
I know most all of my guests say that when we come on. So
it's so nice.
I know. And you know what I was thinking when I was saying that intro, I was thinking, in order to have a good ending to your divorce, you need to have a good beginning. And it's setting yourself up for success, getting those people. And you were saying, look, I really like to work with people at the very beginning. I think any divorce coach does, because there's less cartilage, maybe. No, that's not the word. It's less damage, I should say.
Yes, you can accidentally, when you're acting emotionally, when you're making decisions from a place of resentment or anger or frustration or just vindictiveness, like there's all these ways that you can make decisions that ultimately aren't in your best interest and don't align with what your goals actually are. So to have somebody who can help you stay focused on what those goals are from the very beginning, and even just to help you have someone to help you clarify what those goals are, so you can really be clear on where it is that you want to get to and what you want your divorce to look like long term, can be extremely useful. And so, yes, if I can work with people from the very start and be strategic and intentional about what they want to do, then they can save themselves a lot of pain and damage throughout the process.
I know. And unfortunately, people are literally panicking when it happens or when it hits or even when you're thinking about it. But it's like with anything in life, the better prepared and planned you are with it. And sometimes you can do that and sometimes you can't. It's just that you're going to set your solid foundation a lot stronger from the very beginning. So
absolutely.
Yeah, before we kind of get into that, tell us the story of the backstory of what got you to where you're at, doing what you're doing, and why you're so passionate about it.
Such a good question. So my background originally is in social work. I got my master's in social work from, you were so good, from Yeshiva University in 2009. And I worked as a social worker for a few years, and then my kids were born. And then based on what my earning potential was at the time as a social worker and what it cost to put 2 kids in daycare, I ended up at home with them. And then my marriage, and then I had a 3rd kid later on, and then my marriage ended. And then I was in this place where I was sort of like, okay, there's a few things. One, I recognize how challenging this process of ending a marriage can be, and how hard it is to stay clear-headed and make the right decisions, and how emotionally taxing it is, and all of that, and how support is needed. And because I come from a support background and I come from the profession of wanting to support people, my head is like, wait, this feels like something I could do. And couple that with the fact that I found myself suddenly not in a position to be at home with my kids anymore. And those 2 things together, I just kind of said, okay, I think this is what I want to do now. I want to help people who are going through divorce. So that brings us to today.
To today. And what do you like most about the work that you do?
I like seeing people realize that they have more control in the situation than they think that they do. That's a big part of it, right? Especially when people come to me and like their spouse walked in one day and said, I'm done with this marriage, and they weren't expecting it and it wasn't what they envisioned. It can feel very much like we don't have a say in what's happening and that somebody else is in control of our lives. And so realizing that you actually can take control, and you may not be able to change this specific fact of the fact that the marriage is ending, but you can change how you feel about it. You can change the trajectory of it. You can change what happens next. And so realizing that you have more power than you think you have can be really, really fun to watch as a coach.
Well, I think it's too, I love that, because people often feel like they're totally out of control. And even when they're calling, they're like, oh my gosh, this is happening and that's happening, and he's doing this or she's doing this. And to be able to ground them and to say, look, here's what your options are. These are all these options that you get to choose. You get to choose, and empowering that individual to be able to see those choices and then be able to go mow through that and strategize. I think that's one of the things that you said is if you can strategize from the very beginning, it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And if you can be intentional and not acting emotionally, it can make such a big difference. And I think the interesting thing about the title of this conversation we're having today about stepping stone versus stumbling block, and the work that I do with conflict and trying to avoid, escalating conflict and making things more combative than they need to be, is that I think if you can see divorce as a stepping stone, if you can have a positive perspective on what's happening, then it helps reduce the conflict, because you're less frustrated and less angry about the fact that this is where you're at. It's all about perspective. If you can see it as I'm in a place where I'm stepping into something new and something that could be potentially great, then you don't have to feel angry and resentful about the fact that you're there. And I think, and I talk about this a lot too, in terms of blame and the resentment and the anger that we feel is so enmeshed in the idea that we have failed at something. Right? You only need to figure out who's responsible for something when when something went wrong, right? When everything goes wrong, all of a sudden it's like, well, whose fault is that? Who's responsible for this? Who's to blame? But if you don't look at it as something having gone wrong, you look at it as something running its course, you look at it as the natural evolution of two people who grew apart, then it doesn't have to be something that somebody is responsible for, that somebody is at fault for. It can just be how things are. And if we can get there, then it's much easier to see things as a stepping stone and to move forward in a positive way.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that I remember during my divorce too, my first divorce, I finally got to this point where it's just like, wow, what a gift that this divorce was for me, because it was a wake up call for me personally. So I always say to people, look, what if divorce was happening for you rather than to you? And if you have that and that's basically what I hear you saying is that if you can have that, so that when troubles come and difficulties come, then you can go, okay, what am I learning? What am I to learn from this moment? And how can I step up and be a better person instead of reacting?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it only takes you so far, right? Like there are specific situations within the process that are really frustrating or really anger infused, and it can be very difficult to channel that and not, take it out on your ex or whatever it is. And those are very real emotions. And I'm not trying to suggest that if you just have a positive attitude, then it's super easy and we get through it with no problem. But just being able to look at the whole situation as life is a series of chapters, and this one chapter is ending, and it's ending sooner than I anticipated. And I have to grapple with the grief associated with that ending, but it's not inherently a bad thing that I'm moving on to another chapter. It's just different than what I envisioned. And I think that's what's really challenging for people is we go into this whole marriage thing thinking this is it. This is my last chapter. This is going to take me to the end of my life. And then we get to a point where we realize this chapter's ending a lot sooner than I anticipated. And that can be really jarring. And there is loss and grief associated with it. But it's not inherently bad to be starting a new chapter. It's just not what we thought was going to happen. So we have to readjust our thinking and prepare ourselves for the fact that something different is coming. But different can be incredible if we choose to make it that.
Yeah. So that was the question I was going to ask you is that what do you say to somebody, because you're into de-escalating the conflict, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Does one person have the influence to change that conflict in a relationship?
Great question. And my answer is almost always yes, but there are definitely exceptions. However, if you think of the dynamics between two people as like a circle, like a cycle, and he does this, and then I do this, and then he does this, and then I respond this way, and then it just keeps going. And one of the things I do when I start working with clients is I do an intake, and we sit and we talk about the history of the relationship. And a big part of the reason why I do that is because in talking about the time from when we met until we dated, and then we got married, and then we had kids, patterns emerge. And you start to see the way that people argue with each other, that they communicate with each other. And it's very often there's just a pattern of behavior. And what people don't always realize is that you can stop that pattern in its tracks at any point in the process. It doesn't have to be, he just keeps doing this and I need him to change. I need him to change. I need him to change. He's not going to. But when he does X, if instead of Y, you tried, L, right? Like what would happen? And that can often, just a small tweak somewhere in the cycle can throw everything else into a different place. It's kind of amazing. And I was just talking about this with somebody else. And, I had a client not so long ago who was telling me that she was really frustrated because she was going away for a weekend and she needed her soon to be ex to take their child and watch her for the weekend. And she had sent him like a list of all these questions of like, when are you going to be able to do this? And what are you going to do about this? And he wasn't answering her. And she needed this information in order to be able to go away and have things set. And I really understood her frustration. She wasn't wrong. She needed that information. But she was also the one who initiated the divorce. And she was also the one who was in the house and he had gone to live somewhere else. And there were all these things where I said to her, if you just think for a minute about what this feels like from his perspective,
Mm-hmm.
you're driving the bus. Every decision has been yours. So if you were to approach this instead of, here's what I need you to do, here's what has to happen, and you were to approach this as, I'm going away, can we sit and have a conversation about what you need from me to make this work for our daughter? Because he wasn't the kind of guy who wasn't going to show up for his kid, but he was. I said to her, do you think it's possible that he is regaining just an ounce of control by not answering you right away? By, by at least he can do that. He can just say, I'm going to answer you on my time. I'm going to get back to you when it works for me, and so taking that extra minute to try and understand where the other person is coming from
100%
is so useful. And I've said to clients before, it might taste like vinegar to say the things that like you might, that might get you what you want. You might have to swallow down that vomit a little bit, but sometimes we put ourselves in a position that doesn't feel great, or that like is super hard for us to get out, but it actually in the end serves us, even not just the other person. It gets us the results that we want.
So you just brought up two really important points. I think that the language that we use, the come from, right? The come from of how, seeing the other person is not just an object to be controlled, or that was so powerful during my divorce, is I kept thinking, okay, he probably thinks that I'm taking everything that he's ever worked for in his life. So I need to be really careful with the way that wasn't the case, but the way that I communicated, and I can't control how he responded, but we can control how we respond. And so I love that you had her say, hey, what do you think he's feeling? What do you think he's thinking? What do you think he's experiencing? What do you think he needs control of or validation for? Hey, I know you have a lot on your plate. I know that this may not be the most convenient. However, can we sit together? So the language, I love that you brought that up. And then the other thing that you brought up in that is that it's important that we look at the whole picture of being able to, because if there's a dynamic in a relationship that's one very controlling and the other person's been controlled, I should say, they're going to want to come back once they get away from that. They're going to want to use strategies to control because they've been out of control. So yeah, it's knowing the dynamics within your relationship. And I like that you brought that up, and being able to see that, but to see sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you need that third person to be able to give you that perspective.
Correct. And also it was such a small shift. And I think that's what's so key is like, it wasn't a major behavioral change that she was going to need to be in therapy for 3 years to figure out how to do it better. It was a small, what if you said it with a little bit more empathy? What if you came at this conversation with a little bit more insight into what's happening on the other side? And just that small tweak can have an incredible effect on how he responds. And then the entire pattern is shifted. Yeah.
Do you find that that's a lot of the work that you do with people, is helping them have a perspective shift?
Definitely. Yeah. I think people come into these negotiations, and just want the other person to do something different. Where they get frustrated is like, he keeps saying this and he won't do this. And that there's not always, but there's often a different approach that can be taken that will get a different response. And it's not always the response that's wanted, but I think people innately are extremely defensive and are feeling rejection or resentment or any kind of negative emotion is wrapped up in this whole process. And so how we approach each other, and what you were just saying about your experience, just realizing that there are ways to approach with empathy, even in this really complicated moment.
Yes.
And that it goes a long way. It goes a long way for somebody who's angry at you or feels rejected by you or feels betrayed by you to feel that empathy and feel like you still care about me, even though I'm hurting, or even though our relationship is not what I thought it was going to be. It can really affect things.
I honestly think that is probably, and you don't know this, but I was studying conflict resolution, mediation, and peace building while I was getting my divorce, a heavy litigated divorce. And so I was faced with that all the time. And I truly believe that one of our greatest weapons, and I don't like the word weapon, but our greatest tools that we can use, even in a high conflict, is our heart. Our heart to still see that other person as a human being. And it doesn't mean that we just open up and become vulnerable and we don't have boundaries and things like that. But even when they're throwing all the fiery darts at you and lying about you in the court and not disclosing things in the court, it doesn't mean that you have to show up with that hard wall of nothingness towards them and bitterness. You can still be loving.
And I think what you're talking about here is conflict escalation, because that's the thing, is even when they're showing up in that way and they're doing these things that are awful and that make you feel terrible and angry and that you want to get back at them and that you want to make things more difficult. The thing about divorce is that everything is intermingled. If it's harder for them, it's harder for you. If it's easier for them, it's easier for you. Like it's all everybody's shared experience. And so if you can not take the bait, that's where the de-escalation comes from. And escalation serves nobody. It doesn't ever work out, even if you're in the right. And that's the other thing, is like, you have to let go of this idea of being right. It doesn't matter. What matters is what's going to be the best outcome for everybody. And so, yes, you can feel triggered and you can feel activated in these moments, and you can want to jump in and you can want to yell back and you can want to make sure, I can't tell you how many clients I talk to that just want everybody to know that their ex did this, or that he's the one that cheated, or that he's the one that lied, or she's the one that, wasn't telling me the truth about the money. Like whatever it is, everybody wants everybody to know. And the thing that is hard for people to understand is like, what is the bigger picture here, right? Like, especially if there's children involved, how does it help to have all of this, out there and floating around, and what does that do for you? And also that ultimately you want to get out of this process and be done with the person. Like, you just want to be able to close the door on this chapter. And every time you escalate the conflict, you elongate the process.
And it costs a lot of money.
And it costs money, and it costs time, and it costs resources. And so how can we get to a place where we can just sign the agreement and walk away from the table? And the answer is we have to work together. And it can be really challenging to work with somebody, who is making you feel so dysregulated. But if we can do that, if we can take the deep breath and wait to respond until we're in a better place and we cannot escalate things, it will end better for everybody.
Do you find, Tamar, that people maybe are unrealistic, thinking, "Oh, I'm getting a divorce, so I don't have to deal with them," when in the reality is, especially when you have children, you're going to be dealing with them and communicating with them and negotiating with them and planning with them for a very long time?
So I think one of the hardest things about divorce when you have children is that so much of the breakup advice on social media is like, go no contact, block them, don't talk to them, get them out of your life. You will move on faster if you never follow them on whatever. And it's a great idea. It's incredible advice. If you can completely get people out of your life, you can move on faster. But you can't do that when you share children. It's not possible. And so this thing, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because I feel like people don't talk about it enough. Like, the thing that makes divorce so difficult is that you are forced to be in a business partnership with somebody that you may very strongly dislike, or who may have been, coercively controlling you for years, or who may have been mistreating you or mean to you, or verbally
mistreating their children,
or mistreating the children. And that's a whole other situation. But yeah, and you're forced to be in this relationship with them unless things are so bad that the court doesn't, think that's necessary. But more times than not, most often, there's going to be some kind of co-parenting requirement. And so, yeah, what you're touching on is this really, really challenging experience where you have to be a business partner with somebody who has traumatized you, or who triggers you, or who just really makes you feel not good or safe. And that is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend of ours, and he's having a difficult time with some of his teenagers. And we were talking about the fact, he's like, I just don't think that this would be an issue, these issues, if we had never gotten divorced. And I said, the problem is when you're in the same house, you deal with it, right? But when now you've got two homes and things go skittywampus, they'll just go to the other house, And so it's, and then there's more complexity with that. And it is an interesting thing because you are really truly in business with somebody that you can't
Absolutely.
control what's going on in their house. However, you have to deal with the consequences of it in your house, and you still have to. So yeah, I think it's not something that people typically think, look, the grass is always greener on the other side. It not necessarily. No. And there's a lot of issues that not only the kids deal with, but you have to deal with in future relationships.
Yeah. And I think there's a few things to what you just said. First of all anybody can do is be the parent that they need to be and want to be when their kids are with them. That's all you can do.
Yep.
And, and just hope that the messaging that you want to get through to them is getting through to them when you have them. And to whatever extent you can avoid bad mouthing their other parent, like that backfires more times than it doesn't. It can be used against you. You just to stay neutral, to be the parent you need to be, to show up for your kids the way you want to show up for them. That's really all you can do. But I also would remind your friend that it's very hard to imagine scenarios that aren't what's happening in front of us. And so we forget, and it's easy to romanticize, if we had just stayed together, we wouldn't have these problems. Sure, maybe not, but you'd have other problems. Mm-hmm. And then you're talking about a home where there's two people who do not get along, who are either fighting or giving each other the silent treatment or being dysfunctional in other ways. And kids are growing up in that environment. So that's not necessarily better. It's just different. It's a different kind of not great. So, I think we can play this game of if only we had done this, but people get divorced for reasons, right? Nobody gets divorced for the fun of it. People get divorced for reasons. So yes. And there are all kinds of parenting specialists that work specifically with divorced parents to try and solve some of these challenges that come up. And I highly recommend working with them if this is an issue. But I just wanted to kind of touch on that idea that sneaks into our brain of if we had just not gotten divorced, we wouldn't be having this problem, because I don't ever want adults to feel like they should remain in a situation that is really not working for them because they think there's some benefit to their children. There's always going to be benefits to certain situations and negatives to certain situations. And if you got to a point where it felt like it was time to end your marriage, there were reasons for that. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I think sometimes we have a skewed thought of what the past was, right? We forget. It's kind of like labor, right? You're like, I want to have a kid a week after you. I'm like, do you remember all that pain you just went through? But I think too, the other thing that, I just had it in my head. The other thing that you just brought up was that, and as we kind of transitioned into that, how important is it that as you're helping people I basically reset their life and get ready for that next chapter in life? What are some of the things that you do with them, or that you have seen worked with people in order to really get their mindset on the future instead of stuck in the past?
So one of the first things I'll ask people that are struggling with this is is there a restaurant that you love, that your spouse hated, that you haven't eaten at in 10 years because he just never wanted to go there and you did? And it's order takeout from that place. Or are there activities that you used to love and you haven't done them in a while because it just wasn't something your spouse wanted to do, and so you stopped doing it? And so to me, the beginning of this new chapter is really about self-discovery. Even in the best of relationships, we lose pieces of ourselves. It's not possible not to. Compromise is such a big part of relationships, and that's not a bad thing. It just is how it is. And so to get out of a relationship and have the opportunity to rediscover parts of yourself that you may have lost along the way can be so nourishing and so amazing. And so that's usually the first thing that I'll talk about with people is look, tell me things that you loved doing as a kid. Tell me things you did in college. What were your favorite activities? And more times than not, there will be something. I used to do yoga, or I used to take acting classes, or I used to paint. There's just often things that people, you know, I had somebody tell me once that like they love horror movies and they haven't watched one in 15 years or something, you know, so there's just often things that we just kind of stop doing, even sometimes without realizing that we stopped doing them, just because they didn't fit into the life we were living at that time. And now you have a chance to do that differently and to rediscover and redo certain things. And, you know, sometimes it's as simple as the art you hang on the walls that the other person didn't like or wasn't into or whatever it is. And you get now to build something that's entirely yours. And I think there's something, I read something once that has stuck with me for my entire adulthood. And it was about authenticity versus belonging and how we want both of those things desperately. But when they're at odds with each other, we bury authenticity in order to belong. And so, you know, if you think about people in religious environments who figure out that they're gay, or you think about, you know, things where your true self is in conflict with the community or the family or the place where you are, often you will bury the thing about you that is authentic in order to fit in. And I think you see this with kids all the time. You know, it's like, oh, I like Taylor Swift, but like none of the other boys in the group like Taylor Swift. So it's like, oh, just kidding. I like Bad Bunny. You know, like whatever it is, people just hide who they really are and what their real preferences are in order to fit in. And I think it takes getting to a certain place in adulthood in general, divorce or not, to start feeling comfortable with our authentic selves again. And divorce can be this like really amazing opportunity to just lean into who we really are and what we really love and what are the things about myself that I've kind of not nurtured in the last bunch of years because I was nurturing a relationship, and now I get to just focus on me.
I remember coming out of my first divorce. I had just lost a lot of weight, and I was getting out there and start dancing and, you know, putting new clothes on. And once I really got to the place of forgiveness and love and appreciation for my first marriage, it really freed me to be more authentic. And I love that you said that, is because, and when I started dating for those 8 years before I got married again, there were so many men that were just saying, you know, one of the most attractive things about a woman is a woman who's comfortable in her own skin. And basically what I hear you saying is that, look, go find where you're comfortable, where, you know, come alive again and dance in your own skin so that you can move forward and be able to attract the love that you want, if that's what you want.
Yeah. And I think also for a lot of us when we're younger, especially if we want to have children, I think that partnering up feels like an obligation. It feels like something we need to do. We need a partner. We need to have a family. We need to do those things. And we think that it's something that we're going to commit to for the rest of our lives. And if and when that falls apart, then the need to find someone else becomes much more optional. It becomes something that I'm only going to do if it's really going to enhance my life. Right. Otherwise, I don't really need it. I got what I wanted out of the first go around, right? I have the kids, I got all of that. And now I can focus on me. And if somebody comes along, if I find somebody who really enhances my life experience, then I will consider that opportunity. But I realize now that I'm okay without it, and it's not something I feel obligated to do. And that's not everybody. Plenty of people still really feel like they want to be part of a partnership. They want a significant other. They want to be part of a couple. I think plenty of people feel that. But I think there is also something that happens sometimes once you're out of that first relationship where you realize I'm actually content in my solitude sometimes. Like I'm okay with this. And people can take some time to really appreciate that. And you're seeing more and more of women doing things with other women. And I mean, I keep seeing these stories about like best friends who get divorced at the same time and move into a house together and raise their kids. You know, I think there's so many options for how we do this next part. But to me, the first part of it is the perspective that this isn't some massive failure on anybody's part. This isn't, you know, something terrible that's happening. There's no stigma and there's no shame. Like it just is. It's just the chapter ending.
Yeah, I think it's normal to feel like you're a failure. I think, or that somehow the situation has failed you or you've been failed. But I'm telling you, having the perspective to knowing that it really is a stepping stone, going, okay, I get to pick up the pieces and rebuild the way that I would like to build my life and have a second chance at this. Oh my gosh, it makes all the difference. And I remember at that time going, I get to fall in love again. I get to date again. I get to, I remember even my salt and pepper shakers the first day that we were separated, I came home from work and the salt and pepper shakers stayed where they were when I left. And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah,
and I'm not
right.
saying, I'm really not for divorce. But I think that there are times that it's needful and you do need to move on. And when it is needful to be able to have the right perspective, I love that.
It's such an interesting thing that you just said, I'm not for divorce, because I think people say that a lot to me, right? Like, oh, so you're just like pro-divorce, you just push people to get divorced. And I think the really important distinction here is there's no such thing. Like, either what I am is pro authenticity. Mm-hmm. What I am is pro the decisions that actually serve us. Mm-hmm. And I think that we live in a culture that suggests that marriage is the best choice for everybody. And that just is not true. Mm-hmm. And so recognizing when that's not true anymore, recognizing when a relationship doesn't serve you, being honest about the fact that a relationship isn't working, and then taking the steps to end that relationship so that you have a chance to live the rest of your life in a way that is fulfilling. That's what I'm for. I'm for authenticity and honesty with ourselves.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great way to end this podcast, because that is we have control over that. We truly do have the control of that. So thank you so much, Tamar, for coming on.
For having me.
I know I've got my last question to ask you, which is, what does divorcing strong mean to you?
Oh, I love that. So I think, like, when you think about finishing something strong, when you think about, how you want to end something, it means that you do it in a way that you can feel good about afterwards. And so, like, I want people to be able to look back at their divorce stories and feel like they did it in a way that they can be proud of. And especially when it comes to children, like, I want your kids to be able to look at the way you divorced and not feel traumatized by it. And so, that would be what I think. I think it's strong in your decision-making, strong in your confidence that you've done this to the best of your ability.
And I love that you say the best of your ability, because it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect.
No. Never.
I always say you can be successful without being perfect. And you just do the best that you can, because it is a bit of a messy of a journey.
Yes. And there's no way around that. That's also the thing. Like, just, you have to lean into that a little bit. It's going to be messy.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So where does everybody find you? I'm going to put your banner on there.
So I am on Instagram, NB Divorce Coaching. That is my New Beginnings Divorce Coaching. So it's NB. I'm on Instagram, and my website, nbdivorcecoaching.com, is where you can book a 20-minute discovery call. And we can talk a little bit about your situation and what I do as a coach and how I might be able to help. So that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. And also on all the show notes, it has all of our contact information. Please reach out to Tamar. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And one more time, you've got your podcast as well.
Yes,
so go out there and listen to your podcast. Yes.
New Beginnings, Marriage and Divorce Podcast. Please do.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Hold on just one sec. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Divorcing Strong podcast. Wow, this has been... you really have more control than you sometimes feel like it. And I hope from this podcast, you were able to glean that and be able to have the hope of being able to navigate through your divorce with peace, more peace than you think. So thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Divorcing Strong podcast. This episode is sponsored by Only Subpoenas, where we make subpoenas simple, powerful, and 100% compliant. If you're having a hard time getting the information you need to settle for a fair and equitable divorce, let us help you. Whether you're an attorney or you're navigating divorce on your own, Subpoenas can uncover the truth, secure the evidence you need, and level the playing field. To see how we can help, book an appointment by visiting our website at onlysubpoenas.com.